This afternoon, the Senate voted to confirm Tulsi Gabbard as the new director of national intelligence. The final tally was 52-48, with all Democrats voting in opposition, while Senator Mitch McConnell was the only Republican who voted no. And in a sharp statement that he released after the vote, the former leader of the Republican Party said this, quote, "The Senate's power of advice and consent is not an option. It is an obligation, and one we cannot pretend to misunderstand. The nation should not have to worry that the intelligence assessments the president receives are tainted by a director of national intelligence with a history of alarming lapses in judgment." Adding, quote, "Edward Snowden's treasonous betrayal of the United States and its most sensitive law intelligence activities endangered sources, methods, and lives." Japan is among America's closest treaty allies in the Indo-Pacific, and the risk of conflict in the region is the product of Chinese aggression, not Western threat inflation. Russia's escalation of its unprovoked war of aggression against Ukraine threatens American interests and is solely the responsibility of Vladimir Putin. Entrusting the coordination of the intelligence community to someone who struggles to acknowledge these facts is an unnecessary risk. Jake Sherman still with us. That is pretty sharp from Mitch McConnell.
I would say so. Mitch McConnell unplugged, I guess you could say, Katie. I mean, listen, this is somebody who's now voted against Pete Hegseth for defense secretary and for Tulsi Gabbard for DNI. Next up is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who, as we all know, we don't need to relitigate the whole thing, but has been skeptical about the efficacy of vaccines. Mitch McConnell, of course, is a polio survivor. I don't know how he's going to come down on that, but he's clearly not encumbered by the idea that he's a Republican. He is a Republican, and that he needs to vote down the line for President Trump. But I mean, listen, the entire rest of the Senate Republican Conference, to a person, is supporting his nominees, and Trump has had a clean sweep here. I mean, he has got through after the Matt Gaetz episode in which he nominated Matt Gaetz to be Attorney General. The Trump White House has moved really, really efficiently to get his cabinet in place in, I think, definitely in ways I didn't expect and a lot of people didn't expect up here.
The Senate is doing a lot with these confirmations. They're moving them as quickly as they possibly can. We're going to see RFK soon as well. You're also talking to me about budget reconciliation. Is there anything else happening on the Hill? Usually by this point, we have a better idea of what the agenda is going to be going forward for a new administration, because after all, political capital wears out, and you never have more political capital than you do at the very beginning.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the president has signed into law the Laken-Riley Act, which was that piece of legislation that the House passed last Congress, which stiffens penalties and makes it easier to detain undocumented immigrants who have been accused of crimes. So that was one bill that the House and Senate passed early on, actually during the Biden presidency, but Donald Trump was able to sign. The difficulty, Katie, is that the president and his administration, coupled with congressional leaders on Capitol Hill, have decided to put everything into this reconciliation package to circumvent the 60-vote threshold in the Senate, because reconciliation is considered at a 51-vote margin, majority plus one. So they have done that to the, I guess, detriment, is one way you could say it, of anything else that could pass on a bipartisan basis. I mean, listen, Trump is not terribly interested, I don't think, in bipartisanship, and I think he wants to get his agenda through. But I mean, there's going to be plenty of opportunities, Katie, in the next couple of weeks. March 14th, the government runs out of money. There's going to be a California wildfire aid package at some point soon, we would imagine. Those are items that are going to need to be keeping the government open, the aid package, that are going to need Democratic votes to get over the finish line. So I think you'll see some of that then. But as for a proactive agenda, everything is just wrapped up in this reconciliation package.
Let me ask you one more question about Tulsi Gabbard. She's going to get confirmed. On that subject of her, you got to bring up Russia. She's been pretty warm toward Vladimir Putin, much as Donald Trump has been. Donald Trump was able to secure the release of some Americans, they say, for low-level criminals here in the United States in exchange of Russians. But it makes you wonder what else he might be working with Vladimir Putin on in order to get Vladimir Putin to work with him on these exchanges. We got some word about a conversation that Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump had about the war in Ukraine. How is that conversation and a desire to negotiate a peace, even though Vladimir Zelensky was not on that call? How is that conversation so far, news of it, going over in Congress?
Well, listen, Katie, it doesn't have to be explicitly stated. It's mood music, right? I mean, the president, President Trump, is and his vice president and his Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, are much more willing to enter into settlement agreements over the war in Ukraine, with Ukraine getting not having the totality of its country in its control. That's something that they acknowledge as the reality, and the borders are not going to go back to where they were. So ipso facto, maybe the Kremlin is more willing to cooperate on some of these prisoner swaps, more willing than the Biden administration, which basically said our appetite for giving money to Ukraine is effectively unending, and we want Ukraine to be able to defend itself.